Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when our viewers are going to watch us. My name is Konrad Wirkowski. I'm the programming director of Watchdogs Human Rights in Film Festival. And I have the pleasure of hosting today's talk with Phie Ambo, the director of the film 7030, the film that we are going to screen in our green competition for the first time in Watchdogs history. There's a green competition, so we are very happy that we can screen your film in this competition, because it's a very good film and it's very timely, I would say, in these times. I would like to ask a first question, and because in your film, it seems that you had gained an incredible access to your protagonists, especially to politicians, which we rarely see on screen, really, because usually politicians tend to discuss behind closed doors. And now in the film, we can see really what is going on behind those closed doors. So I wanted to ask, how did you manage to do that? And have you planned your film as it is, or you were planning like kind of a different film and it just happened? How was it?
I'm really, really happy that you look at the film and you think I have this enormous access, because it was so difficult to get there. I'm never going to be doing another film about politicians, because the door was closed until the very last minute. So it was really difficult to gain the trust, because the politicians are used to, when you come with a camera, that you are there to sort of expose them, or you're there to show that something is rotten, and you're there to sort of get someone fired, or that it will create a lot of conflict. And I don't work that way. I work with people that I believe are going to make a change. So it was, for me, it was really difficult to explain that I don't work in a traditional journalistic way. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm there to go on an exploration. I'm there to see what happens. And it took a long time, especially for the climate minister and his whole system, to realize that they could open the door and they could see the scenes that I shot, and there was nothing to worry about. So at the beginning, you know, when in Denmark, when we had the election, the climate election, so to speak, I knew that if they're going to make a climate law, and it's going to be so ambitious that it might be the world's most ambitious climate law, this would be the first time in a long time that we could be proud of something that we have done in Denmark, because we have this image of ourselves as a nation that's really green, but we're not, because we are buying all kinds of stuff that comes in from all parts of the world, which means that we are, I think it's number 4 on the list of the most polluting consumers. So we have a green image, but we're not a green nation. So I thought it would be great to do a film about this climate act. So I started communicating with the minister already in the summer vacation, and they would start in September. And he was like, well, that sounds funny and exciting, and we'll do it. But, you know, when I stood there, the door just didn't open. So I started following the climate activists and you know, following what they did according to press on this climate act. And I followed Ida Auken, and she was the chairperson of the climate committee at that time. So, and she was open. She was not in the government. She was part of the supporting parties, but she was not in the government, which made it much more easy to follow her. Once you get in the government and you have a minister post, it's difficult. So I just started filming, and then I thought, well, at one time, the minister is going to open the door, because it looks strange that all these people are in the film and the minister is not in the film. So, over time, I got to open the door and go inside. But it was difficult. It was really difficult. And at one point, I just called them and said that I'm not going to be able to make this film if you don't trust me at all, because I can't as one person delete all the mistakes that hundreds of journalists have done. I can't, that's not possible for me. I don't have that kind of power. And then, I don't know why, then the door opened. Mm-hmm. So it was a difficult process, but to me, it was just important to show that this movement is both made by citizens in the street, by the climate activists, and it's made by the politicians. And they have to sort of, even though they go in a green direction, all of them, but they do it in different ways, but they are part of the same movement. And the politicians are not going to make ambitious climate acts if the population is not ready for it. So it's all the time. I wanted to show that we can't keep pushing the responsibility around us. We have to, all of us, if we live in democracies, push the development and also be ready to make changes in our own lives when the development happens.
Sure. And was there anything that you actually recorded, but you weren't able to put it into film? I mean, you wanted to show something, but it was impossible.
Yeah. I had a lobby meeting with the oil and gas industry that was with Ida Auken. And she just gave them the big speech about how could they look in the eyes of their grandchildren if they kept exploiting oil reserves and stuff. So they got pushed all the way to the back of the room. So after that recording, they said, we don't want to be part of this film. I think that they had expected that maybe they could turn her, that maybe they could explain to her, like all of the industry does, that we are going to do it in the most green way. And if we don't do it in Denmark, then they're going to do it in other countries that are less green. You know, that's how all these lobbyists speak. So, but they didn't turn her, so they didn't want to be part of the film.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, sure. And because the film, I mean, it was some time has passed already since you finished the film. And what's the situation now with this law and with this act? Is it still like people believe that it's going to happen, and is it going to be postponed, or what's the politicians' feeling, and what's the popular people's feeling about it?
Yeah, well, you know, they're arguing just as much now as they did before it was passed. So all the time it's this dynamic. I think the strongest part of the Danish Climate Act is that you have to have this independent council of climate experts that every year they go through the plan. So what have the politicians decided this year? Is it enough or isn't it enough? They go through that every year, and then they give their feedback in February. And so the politicians are being held up to the ambition every year. So even though they failed to make enough ambitious agreements the first year, they are changing the strategy because this independent climate council says you have to work faster, you have to do more. But one thing I think was really, really positive is that just making the decision to stop exploiting oil and gas made it possible for the climate minister of Denmark to go to COP26 and create this BOGA coalition. It's called BOGA coalition. And it's a coalition of 11 countries who have now decided to not exploit any more oil and gas. And that's only something that he could do because the law was passed in Denmark. So sometimes it's just, Denmark was actually the biggest oil producer in the EU when the decision was made to stop taking up more oil after 2050. And even though 2050 is long, it's a long time from now, it's going to stop long before that, because when you know a business is ending, the people don't want to invest. So if you put a goal, even though it's too late, 50, it should stop in 30 or 40. I'm quite sure it's going to stop earlier, because once they set an ambitious goal, all business is going to change. That's what we see a lot in Denmark, is that the industry is changing sometimes quicker than the politicians. Because now they have a goal. Now they know we're going to reach 70% reduction in 2030. So we might just as well get started. But there, of course, all the time there's conflict that, then for instance, something like biogas was labeled a green energy form, which it isn't. In Denmark, we don't have enough wood to burn off to, so we export big trunks of wood from Canada and stuff like that. That's just insane. So all the time we have to revisit what did we think was green and turned out to be black. So it's a process all the time to keep looking at, are we moving in the right direction? And for that, we need both NGOs and the politicians and the industry and just the people who can vote to keep pushing in the green direction. Mm-hmm. So it's not quiet. It hasn't sort of calmed people down, and so now everything is going to be okay, because this is it's going to keep being a struggle. Mm-hmm. And what's surprising is that even though we had this big climate election and people in Denmark are really interested in climate, they're not that interested in having a windmill in their backyard. They don't want it to happen where they live, which is a huge problem. So we're actually not putting out enough wind energy because it's getting canceled all the time because people want it, but not in their backyard. That's a really huge problem right now.
Yeah. And because in Poland, for example, we have a problem, let's say, with coal. Because Poland produces mines a lot of coal, but I think it's the problem of the politicians, because our government is a right-wing populist one, so they are not going to push the green agenda at all, afraid that they will lose their support. So I was wondering whether you think that it was a special moment in your country in the 2019 that there was this coalition of parties, of politicians that were convinced that it has to be passed. I mean, this law, the more liberal left-wing green politicians get together. But don't you have the problem with the populist movement or the populist politicians that are not willing to support the green politics?
We do have that problem, but they're getting fewer and fewer, to tell you the truth, because see, in the light of the latest ICCP report, it sort of shut up everyone who was a climate skeptic, because you just look like a lunatic. If you keep saying that this is not man-made, you just look like someone who's lost your mind, because now the science is so clear. So even though they don't want to make changes, especially in the farm industry, in Denmark, we are next to Bangladesh, the most farmed country. So we have animals in cages all over. Yeah. We had this mink scandal a year ago, where we had 17 million minks in cages in Denmark, 17 million, and nobody knew that it was this big. Nobody knew it. And it was a huge disease spreader. It was a COVID-19 crazy catastrophe just waiting to happen. So all the minks were put down, and just putting the minks down actually saved us 25% of the pollution in the industry. So there's a lot of this going on in Denmark, that the population, we don't know that we have that many pigs or that many mink or that many, because there have been some really, really powerful lobbyists in farming. And that's starting to crumble, but it's moving slowly. But if you ask me, they're gonna find out a way to make plant-based food sooner or later, because that wave is coming, and it's only getting bigger because it's getting cheaper to buy a burger that's made from plant-based beef than from beef from an animal. And the technology is moving so fast that I think in Denmark, we're looking at a moment where everything will collapse unless this whole farm industry looks at other way of farming, because we can't compete on the prices. So we only compete on putting more animals closer together. And it's never going to be a good business, because in China, you have pig farms that are sort of like factories, 12 stories, factories of pigs just standing there, living their lives in these cages. And that's not going to be, no one can compete with that. So if apart from the climate and the animal welfare, obvious problems, the whole economy is going to collapse. So even though they don't want it, I'm sure it's going to happen. And they just might as well just start transforming into plants instead of animals, because it's such a bad business.
And are there still like protests, the activists are still like pushing the agenda, or is it like is there a feeling that everything is already done?
No.
that we are safe. It's okay.
No, not at all. They are just as aggressive as they used to be. But actually, sometimes I feel that it's a little bit unfair, because the politicians in Denmark are actually really doing something, as opposed to a lot of other countries where there's still a lot of, corruption among the politicians, and they are investing in oil industry at the same time as being politicians, and stuff like that. We don't have a lot like that, and we have a climate minister who's actually really pushing. He's really, he's working 24/7 for this agenda. So I think that it's in many ways it's a little bit unfair that he is the one taking all the shit, because it's the first climate minister we've had for many years who's actually doing something about it. But it's also it's come at the same time as the public awareness is big. So even though he's doing much more than the former climate minister did, it's also at a time where people are anxious and they want a change to happen. So what I think sometimes in Denmark is that we become a little bit too narrow around our own country and what we do in our own country, instead of thinking that we have all of India, we have countries that where temperatures are rising, they have to have air conditioning. They have to have some of the things that are polluting the most. And that's why the new technologies have to be developed. Mm-hmm. That in Denmark, we tend to talk badly about technology, say it's a technology fix, and we can't rely on that. But in my opinion, we don't really have a choice, because we, in our part of the world, created the enormous problems that they have in the global south. And so we have to help fix it with other kinds of technology that can be used in those countries. So, and also it's really not fair to say that now we've used maybe 4 planets when we get to Mars or something, but you can't get a car and you can't eat meat, or you can't do all the stuff that we've done for so many years and completely change the planet. You can't do it. It's a sort of a new colonialism in my eyes. So we have to keep the global perspective all the time.
And do you think that it's already the level of knowledge of the ecology in the Danish society is so high that it will never be reversed? I mean, it's that the people are already so well educated, and they are thinking about what they're doing, and about the not only about their well-being, but also about the planet. Yeah, I mean, it also, I think it has to do with education.
Yeah.
Also, so yeah. Do you think it's irreversible? I mean, it will go on like that, and the level will be higher and higher?
I would hope it worked that way, but I'm not at all sure. Actually, I started a school in 2014 for kids, 0 to 9th grade, the Green Free School. And that's about educating kids in this whole green transition, that they need to know other things. They need to be better at using their hands. They need to know how to build a farm in the city. They need to know how to manage all kinds of challenges that they're facing, because this is nowhere to be seen in the Danish educational system. And I had 2 children going to school, and I was just, they are not learning about how to manage in a time where we're all transforming. So I created a school with some other people, and it's been difficult to communicate that kind of curriculum really has to go into big mainstream schools. It can't just be that we show them an Al Gore film and then they freak out and they get scared and they don't have any kinds of ways to take action. They don't know how to build something because we took out all the craft in the school and sort of made everyone an academic. And we can feed pigs with academics in Denmark. We need people who can work with their hands. We need people who have a craft. We need people who can build this whole new society that we need. So I'm not relying on anything to happen on its own at all. I think we need to push and push and push as much as we can.
And there's still a lot to do. Yeah, I mean,
a lot to do.
Even from your perspective, I mean,
Definitely.
Seeing from our perspective, we are like in completely different world here, because it's, you know, even like watching your film, it was really incredible for me. Like, I understand that you were maybe disappointed by your politicians, but seeing the level of culture, I mean, with the negotiations and the compromises and so on, and it was like really incredible to see that it's so high level. Like, I mean, comparing to our politics and political world in situation in Poland. And that was really, really impressive, I should say.
But, you know, to tell you the truth, I was also, when I started making this film, it was also because I was worried about what happens when they close the door. Do they know that this is serious? I mean, do they have sleepless nights like I had? Because I was really worried about the democratic process. Is it too slow? Because climate is moving fast and democracy is slow. Do we have the right way of solving this, you know, unseen catastrophe that's coming? So I really, you know, for that reason, I really wanted to get behind that door. I really wanted to look them in the eye and see, do you know how serious this is? And it completely calmed me down when I realized they know, and they are working really hard, and they are trying to make all ends meet. And I don't feel any kind of doubt that they want it and they know it. It's just that it's slow. But during this process, I also had much more respect for this perspective that you have to make sure that people have workplaces. You can't just shut down all oil unless you can, you know, get people into wind. We don't want this situation where people lose their jobs. And it's not, I'm sure in Denmark, we could figure out a way to get, you know, to pay people. But a job is not only about payment. It's also about feeling that you have a social community. You get up in the morning and you go somewhere and you do something that has a purpose in life. So before I made the film, I was much more like, close down all farms and close down all the concrete factories and close down oil. And now I'm much more respectful about the transition has to happen so people don't lose their jobs in the transition. But I was much more arrogant before before I realized that it has to be, you know, we can't rush it more than we're doing.
Yeah, and the picture has to be broader, to understand everything.
Yeah.
And what was also incredible for me that after watching your film, you have the feeling that all the work that activists do on the street, and this is really like pushing things forward. I mean, of course, the politicians have to be responsive for that, because but anyway, I mean, it's like really shows, your film shows the power of people, in fact, because this, on one hand, it's politicians who are really like somehow different than we expect, but on the other hand, there's also this power of streets, power of people, of young people. And it was like really incredible for me when I read that it was really like the youth movements that pushed the things forward.
Definitely.
And what do you think? Like, how did it happen that so many young people are involved?
But, you know, that's something that's so interesting, like a time spirit. What is it exactly? Why at this exact moment could a young girl from Sweden start talking about climate change, and youth from all over the world started to listen and started to strike with her. It was just, that's been sort of a Gandhi moment. It's been sort of incredible to see that, because there's been activists before Greta Thunberg. There's been a lot of young girls saying the same things, but I don't know why, but at that time, it just went through. The message just went through. And scientists have been saying this for at least 30 years, and no one is listening. Everyone is just la, 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 la. And then this strong voice from a child sort of just opens people's hearts, or the young people's hearts. I'm sorry about this email sound. But why does that happen? I honestly don't know, but I think it's so interesting when these big transitions, why did it happen? The first person went through the Berlin Wall. What was it that happened at that exact moment? But in Poland, you have a strong tradition for taking the streets and raising your voices, even though it's much more dangerous than it is in Denmark. So you also have this power of the people. That's a deep-rooted tradition in your democracy. And I just think it's important to keep explaining to people that's how big transitions happen. They never happen just from the top down. They happen from the bottom up, with people getting together, realizing that they have a voice. They are in a democracy, they have a voice, and they have a power. That's so important to remember, because if we don't use that voice, we don't have democracies. Then we have systems that we don't want to have.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we have the time for one last question. What are you working on now? Because I've read that you're working on a new film.
Yeah, I'm working on a film about rewilding nature, because as I said before, Denmark is the second most farmed country in the world. We only have 2% wild nature in Denmark. Everything is a garden. So I'm working on a film where a big foundation has bought a forest that's completely dead. It's just black in the ground because it's only been used to use wood for building materials and stuff like that. And they are transforming it into wild nature. So I've been filming that since 2018, and I'm starting to edit now in January. But that's going to be a shorter film. It's just 40 minutes because I wanted it to come out soon. Because right now in Denmark, we have these discussions about national parks, that the government has decided we're going to have a lot of national parks. We're going to do something about the biodiversity crisis, and nobody wants them. Nobody wants to leave the territory. They want a mountain bike. They want to climb in the trees, and they want to sleep in shelters and all the stuff that you can't do if you want the rare eagle to land there. So I thought that it was important to finish this film quicker than I first anticipated and let it come out. And so we can start discussing, do we really need to sleep in shelters all over the nature? So that's what I'm working on now.
All right. All right, great. So good luck with the new film, and I hope we'll have a chance to see it also.
Yes, and thank you so much for showing my film. I'm really, really happy about that.
That's great. We're really, really happy to have it. Okay, Phie.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Goodbye.
You too. Yeah.